Megan, Camille, welcome to the show. Thanks for joining me today.
Hello, thank you so much for having me.
Now, Megan, I've looked at your bio. This is the first time we've had the opportunity to actually have a conversation and meet. We didn't do a lot of off-camera preparation. We're just into it. So we're getting to know each other in real time, as are my guests or as are my listeners. So I like to open up because, listen, your bio is really interesting and I want to dig more into that. But I always like to open with my guest's take on if somebody walks up to them today and says, "So Megan, what do you do?" What is your question, or what is your answer to that question these days?
I am the CEO of Camille Enterprises. So I am an intuitive business consultant and I support my clients in scaling their businesses to multiple 6 and 7 figures. And so I spend most of my time running Camille Enterprises as the CEO.
So beautiful. Now, there's a couple things in your bio and something that you just mentioned, but there's, you talk about being intuitive, but in your bio, there's a word that kind of stood out, which is psychic. And so I would like to have some better understanding. That's fascinating. And, first off, because you entered the conversation at intuitive, for you, what does that mean? So in other words, you are intuitive. I'm assuming that. And are you also coaching clients on how to tap into their intuition?
Yeah, definitely. I feel like that is one of the most powerful tools in my toolbox as an entrepreneur. I built 4 businesses, and often my first 2 was strictly off of the back of my intuition. And so, by the 3rd one, I started going, there's something different about what I'm doing compared to what the average person is doing. What is it? And it was really listening to my intuition beyond all logic, beyond all responsibility was the intuition. And we all have this. And, even the word psychic is really aligned with that. I use intuition because it's just a little softer for some people that might go, oh, what does that mean? They're very much the same. It is being able to be tapped in and tuned into the quantum grid, to all of the energy that is around, and really be taking intuition is what I like to call the language of that quantum field or source consciousness or divinity. It is the language used. That's what intuition is. And when we listen, feel, and harness that intuition, we can be led in the most opportunistic paths. And so part of what I support my clients with is learning to listen to their own intuition so that they are not forever dependent on a business coach or a consultant, that they can really start leaning on their own inner knowing.
So I love the conversation, and I'm very intrigued by it, as well as I'm very interested in terms of, part of how I've lived my own life. My wife, Stephanie, and I are very much, tapping into those sources or resources, if you will. But, often when you speak with somebody who's a little bit more intellectual, they look at the intuition side of it and the intuitiveness and going, that's emotional, and our emotions fool us. And so we got to be very cautious about making emotional decisions. Now, the easiest one to tap into in that conversation is that our money is an emotional driver. It's an emotional trigger. And so when we get into a conversation about something like that, how do you differentiate, or how do you support or coach somebody that's saying, okay, there is a difference between the intuition that you feel or that you sense versus the emotion? Now, I don't know if that's the right question, but that's kind of one of the things that showed up for me.
Yeah, so this is really learning to discern between intuition, logic, and the nervous system, right? Because intuition isn't emotional. Intuition is an instantaneous knowing. There is actually no emotional pull to it. However, some people can get emotional about the information that is delivered, right? Maybe defensive or scared, or, afraid, whatever that is. But often we are constantly bombarded at the same time with intuition, nervous system, and emotion. and logic. And so our logic is oftentimes the loudest because it's what we have been programmed to care the most about, to give the most attention to. And the logic only looks from the past. So the logic actually can't see the future. The only way it can predict the future is to say, well, this is what happened in the past, so it's most likely to happen in the future. And so logic is actually the worst thing we can rely on in business. And that's where most people get really freaked out, right? Like, we're talking about money, we're talking about business. How can it be that logic is the least reliable? And it's because it's the slowest. It's the slowest to make great results happen. It's the slowest because it's going off of the past. Our emotion is not any more reliable, right? Because the way we respond emotionally to something, again, takes us back to our original programming, which has happened in the first 7 years. Intuition is beyond all of that. It is all knowing, seeing, being. It is past, present, future. And that's why it's the most reliable and the safest.
So I think you used the phrase, I recall, was quantum field, I think is the term you used. And is that different, let's say, than the collective conscious or the collective consciousness? Is that a phrase or a term that you would intertwine or make the same as? I'm just kind of reaching here to be on the same page as you.
Yeah, those are different. Collective consciousness is the collective consciousness of the planet, all of our programming put together, right?
Mm-hmm.
The quantum field is source consciousness. So some people might call this divinity, they might call it God, they might call it goddess, whatever that is, that field, that never-ending energy that is always in motion, always creating, is referred to as the quantum field.
Got it. So when you're tapping into your intuition now, you're doing that through what? I'm assuming some form of meditation, whether that be TM or breathing or some form of, I guess, meditation where you're actually slowing down and kind of tapping into that source. Is that a fair statement, or is that the tools that you provide or put into practice?
Yeah, initially we really get to lean on some processes, some tools. Meditation is always a great one. Breath work is a fabulous one. Movement is good. These things help us take our mind out of the way and open us up again to that universal language, to that intuition. For me personally, those are not required anymore. I am more often than not always, but I am more often than not living in the flow of intuition. And so it doesn't require me to kind of step out of my human grind and go into meditation for that intuition. I can just tap in right then and there. And again, that comes from years and years. As even a little girl, this was what I was doing. Now, when it comes to supporting clients, everyone has their own unique entry point, I'll say, right? Some people just kind of have that instant knowing. Other people have a sensation. That one I see is really big, is a sensation somewhere in the body. Other people, it is, they have pictures in their mind's eye. Whatever your entry point is, then we really start working that particular muscle. If someone is already a fabulous meditator, then actually that's a great entry point to start bringing in some of those intuitive downloads, directions, whether it is in a date, your personal life or within business. But having a space where, yes, you're tapping in, you're using your entry point, and then you're really documenting what that guidance is without running over it in your mind with the logic, because then you'll talk yourself out of it. And then once you document it, you really start taking action on the specific intuitive download.
So there's what shows up for me in all this. So number one, I 100% am on the same page as you. I often, have learned over my many years of being on this planet and coaching and doing all of the things, I'm often asked, like, where do you come up with that stuff? And I go, I don't know. I just channel it. It just shows up for me, and I know it to be the right direction or the right question or the right guidance, whatever that might be. And so I guess to some degree, it's my superpower, only in that I really haven't ever honed it. I've just learned to listen to it better, and I've learned to trust it. Now, what I'm hearing you say is that anybody can tap into that, and it takes training, it takes time. And I think probably the struggle that many have is like, it's like going to the gym. They go to the gym and they want results. Okay, well, okay, why aren't I stronger, lighter, better, a week later, a day later, a few hours later? It's like I walked into the gym, like, gym, do me, and it doesn't work that way. You have to, over time, do the weights, you got to do the push-ups. Nobody can do them for you. You got to eat right. You got to do all the things to see those physical gains. And if I'm kind of tapping into and understanding what you're suggesting is that, or what you're saying in the life you live personally and coach, is that, okay, I'm going to give you some insights into how to tap into that so that you're making better decisions, choosing a different direction. And so first off, is that accurate? Is that a way of framing it?
That is accurate. And I actually really like this example of the gym, because we go to the gym, and while that is the exercise, right, that is part of the practice, the more important piece is what we eat outside of our time in the gym, right? And so the most important piece about working the muscle of the intuition is, once you've received the download, is to take action on it. And that's something that you said, like, oh, I've been, just following this. That actually is a very well worked intuitive muscle when you're taking action. If we just sit down and we get the intuitive download and then we do nothing but work with it, it is like going to the gym and binging every night, right? It's like you actually don't create any movement forward with that potent energy that you were using during an intuitive download. And that's where I see the biggest gap with most people, is they're up for, tuning into their intuition. They're really excited about it. And then based on the guidance that they get, that's where it falls. Because they're like, that doesn't make sense. That sounds really dangerous. That is very logical. That would make me irresponsible. And so they don't follow through with the intuitive download. And so it stays quite a floppy muscle.
Well, but again, what's really interesting for me about this conversation is that I've come to recognize, and my wife is brilliant. You say psychic, I tease her about being psycho, and then others tease her about being a witch. There is certainly a gift that she has that she actually taps into, and she's usually so far ahead of her time in that. So I really am appreciating, and have come to appreciate, that intuition, that intuitiveness, that individuals like yourself hone that skill. And in your case, you've gone on to take it and be able to coach it, teach it. Now, if I'm looking at that, and I'm that logical engineer, accounting brain, whatever that is, I'm the Excel spreadsheet guy, but I think there's something beyond that. How am I engaging with you? Like, what's going to attract me to you? What is a sign or a signal or something that says, this Megan Camille lady, like, she's got this stuff going on. I'm drawn to it. Or is it, like, why would I come to you? I guess is the question. Like, what is going to compel me to say, I got to tap into something, or I've got to see what else is out there?
Yeah, great question. Because I tend to attract a lot of the A-type, process-driven, logical entrepreneurs out there. And I think what really calls them to me is this idea that there's actually something beyond their thoughts, right? There's something beyond the spreadsheet, that actually the spreadsheet doesn't hold all the answers. The box is limiting, and they're looking for liberation versus limit. And when we're ready for a real quantum shift in our life, it typically requires doing something very different than we've done before. And I would say I'm a very balanced person, because I love a solid strategy. I love a solid plan that was directed by the intuition, that was directed by the infinite potential, not something that was based on past experiences. And I think that is what has set me and my clients apart in the entrepreneurial world is, well, how do you actually build 4, 6, and 7-figure businesses in 10 years? How do you do that in 3 hours a day? I do not work full time, right? Like, how does that happen? And it happens outside of the box. It happens outside of the spreadsheet. And so I think that there is a natural tendency to want to know, is that possible for me? So that's typically why more of the A type or spreadsheet or very process logical driven is attracted to this approach, because it's more. There's more.
Well, I think there's, that actually makes sense. That intellect of me kicks in and goes, okay, well, that actually would make sense given that if somebody's already tapping into that intuition or feels like they are, or feels that they have that sense that they can read a situation or go with a gut feel or whatever that might be, they're already kind of tapped into it. They're going, okay, no, I got this figured out, to the degree that they've got it figured out. So there isn't a gap there. They're not trying to fill a void. They're already feeling maybe that they're there. What you're suggesting in this is that somebody along the lines go, I think there is more. I have had experiences of, and I want to tap into that deeper, and I want to hone that particular skill. So actually, intellectually, what you just described actually does make sense, that you would attract that A-type personality. It actually kind of aligns with that gap that they may try to be trying to fill. Now, is it this is my own story, or not, I don't mean my story, but the story I'm telling myself is women are known to be more intuitive than men. Is that your experience?
It's not my experience. I mean, I can see why that is a big message. Men are very, very intuitive. And unfortunately, they are heavily taught to be more logical. So logic is a teaching, right? And I have a little boy, he's 10 years old, going on 11, and he's very logical comparatively to the 4 girls that we have, right? And so while there is more of a tendency to go toward the logic, it doesn't mean that the intuition is not as accessible, right? It's still very, very accessible. And so when men start tapping into their intuition, they go super, super fast because they already have the structure, right? They already have the structure. And so adding in that intuitive spark actually is like jet fuel for them. Now, women are very naturally intuitive, yes, and many of them are lacking container, right? They're lacking the structure of it. And so when they're given structure and able to follow their intuition, because corporate or mainstream money, that has been not a helpful thing for natural intuitives and for women. However, when they're free to be in their intuition and given a container, then they have jet fuel. So structure for women is the jet fuel. Intuition for men is the jet fuel. As long as you are still naturally using the natural tendencies, right? Women still need to be using the natural tendency to intuition, but the jet fuel would be structure.
It's interesting that in my own life and in my own businesses, I'm actually surrounded by what I refer to as powerful women. And that in my definition of powerful women in the sense of business is those women who are very operationally minded, very structure minded, but they have no problem in terms of tapping into that intuition and actually sharing, intuitively, or they get a gut feeling. And so it really kind of verifies exactly what you just said, that, there is that structure that women have if they have it, but they need to sometimes gain it, whereas they naturally kind of go to that intuitive side. So it's an interesting thought process in many ways. I don't need to spend a bunch of time on it, I don't think, but it is an interesting phenomena when you start to realize that if we can slow down long enough to listen to ourselves. Now, this is where I want to, kind of tap a little deeper into this whole thought process. When you look at creating and driving business, now on the surface, I'm going, are you seeing perhaps that, or you have experienced or proven it, that people have all that they need intuitively? Like forget about the hows necessarily. Operationally, you may be great, but there is a place where you're saying, if you really want to grow your business, if you want to create the life on your terms, you already have the answers. That's, as a coach, that's my belief. When I coach, I rarely give anybody answers. I always believe you have the answers. My job is to ask the right questions. My job is to draw you into where those answers live. And those answers often live intuitively. They live somewhere, and you just haven't been asking yourself the right questions. I'm going to help you and I'm going to ask great questions. That's one of the kind of thought processes that I have around it, and one of my own kind of, I guess we'll call it, ways of doing that. Now, is for you, if somebody comes to you, what is your kind of fundamental or your philosophical belief system foundationally? Is it along those lines that we have the answers, you just need to learn to tap into it, or what is it for you?
Yeah, it's a little bit of both, because I do more consulting than coaching. There
Okay.
is coaching around working the intuitive muscle. Initially, we're doing intuitive consulting. So I'm
Mhm.
tapping in and tuning in and tapping into your quantum field, your own
Right.
energetic field, and giving the conduit, right, being the mouthpiece for the information coming through. Ultimately, you are your own greatest teacher. I am my own greatest teacher, right? And so
Mhm.
when we hire a coach or when we hire a consultant, it is a gift to ourselves to equip ourselves with the highest possible support. So initially, it is consulting. And that's why I use the word intuitive business consulting,
Yes.
because I am doing initially consulting. And then towards the end, we're starting to wean off of that and have them lean on their own intuition, right? And so it isn't an immediate like, hey, we're working your intuition muscle and you've got to figure this out. There is a high level of consulting originally, especially when we are downloading 12 to 24 month blueprints and business plans. That is more in an intuitive consultation form. And then as we're working that blueprint and they're seeing, wow, this has created massive results. I do want to be relying on intuition. It has proven to be better for me. So let's start working that intuitive muscle. And then that's where the coaching comes in, so that they are tapping into that field that I did, right? Because it is a field that is available for everyone. And so you can tap into it as easily as I can, and any client can. And ultimately, like I said, like you said, we are our own greatest teacher. We have the answers already within, and it just hasn't been something we have been supported and taught of how to access.
That's so fascinating. So if I'm hearing you right, and don't know how good a job I'm doing that so far, but if I'm hearing you right, Megan, if I'm approaching you and I'm saying, Megan, I want to hire you or I want to engage you as a consultant, you're going to sit down with me, you're going to have a conversation, we're going to go through whatever process you go through, but ultimately that's kind of where, and I'll use the word because it's more familiar for me, is that's where you're going to tap into your intuition, but also that kind of psychic part of it. So you're picking up whatever you're picking up. So not unlike me, when I'm sometimes working with a client, I just know it's whatever channels, like it just shows up for me. I don't know where it comes from.
Mhm.
It just shows up for me. Now, that serves me, but on your side of it, that's kind of what you're doing. You're having a conversation, and you're also picking up whatever you pick up, that intuition that skill that you've honed, and then you're taking it from there to guide, and then have future other conversations about what's going on. Is that in line with what I'm hearing?
Exactly. Yes, exactly.
So beautiful. Now, I guess some might say that that's some form of being a medium. Is that accurate, or that takes it off into a whole different stratosphere?
Yeah, I think the terms are debatable.
Yeah.
For me, a medium is more of like, spirit communication, speaking with past loved ones. That is not a strong suit for me.
Yeah.
That one's not a strong suit. Mine is really just in that untapped potential where all of the information is existing at all times.
Mhm.
And my interpretation of mediumship is more around like communication with like dead people.
Cool. Got it. So, I love this whole thought process and what you're sharing. I think that because number one, I experience it. I don't do what you do, but I 100% understand what you're saying. And you are obviously you can articulate it, and you've turned it into a business in the way you have. And I love that. But this isn't your first go either. I mean, you've done this multiple times. You've built other businesses. You've
Yeah.
been on this journey, and I wanted to go back a little bit. what got you here? You mentioned earlier that as a little girl, or a young girl, you actually had some of this going on. What did that look like? What was it for you that you started to, when you reflect, you can look back and go, yeah, no, I was doing this when I was 6 or whatever the age is for you.
Yeah, the breadcrumbs were coming from early on, and actually almost everybody that I've ever spoken to can actually track back to their childhood and see the crumbs of their future or their present life now, and
Mhm.
that there were breadcrumbs even in childhood, and I was no exception to that. I was extremely what an open channel as a child, very, very afraid. I could see lots of things. I had premonitions. I could hear and otherworldly things. And I was just honestly extremely blessed for parents that cultivated what was going on versus medicated what was going on.
Mhm.
I certainly could have gone into the system of mental health and that sort of thing, and instead I was supported along a more spiritual path.
Mhm.
So even back then, I was very wide open and psychic and intuitive, and I started giving readings at about 15. Was my first publicity. I was in the newspaper. My mom was an entrepreneur, and she supported women entrepreneurs. And she would let me go into these groups and do intuitive readings. I had, again, these were, primarily financially focused in their business women. And so that was a beautiful little sneak peek into what was to come in my adulthood, having no idea at that time. And then, after those teenage years, I really struggled with fitting in. I really wanted to just be normal. I did not want this intuitive thing. At first it was cool. I was going to be in the newspaper and this and that. And then pretty soon, kids at my school couldn't hang out with me because their parents read the newspaper. And, we were from a small, white, conservative town. And that was a big no-no. I mean, we got letters in the mail that called us witches and wanted us to leave town. It was very Hollywood,
Mhm.
but we really lived that. Thankfully, we did eventually move, and then in my later teens, I was sex trafficked, and there was a lot of my intuition still at play there. There was many times I could have left. I knew that there was intuitive messages coming through telling me to go home, go home. And it was such a boot camp in a couple of things, one of which was sales, and the other was in following my intuition, and that we have free will and free choice, that we can have the most fabulous intuitive downloads and still choose what our logic or what our nervous system or what our wounding wants us to choose. We can go that direction or we can follow our intuition. It's our highest good is always coming back around to us. And so after that 4 years, when I finally left, I was unemployable. Unfortunately, in the sex industry, it is often the ones being exploited that leave with a record, that leave with the consequences, and the ones doing the exploiting don't. They kind of just go under the radar, a little unnoticed, unfortunately. And so I got to leave with a pretty solid record, and I was unemployable. And it was a huge gift. It was a huge gift to be unemployable because I had a couple of options. One, work very, very, very shitty jobs, or two, learn to generate money. And the other gift was I ended up being a single mom of 2 kids. So I needed to make a choice. Like, do I go and spend 40 or 50 hours working a bare minimum wage job and I put my kids in childcare all day and pay for that? Or do I learn to generate my own money? And it was the second one that really changed the trajectory of our future. I started harnessing that intuition that I ignored during those few years that I wished I was trying to get away from in my teenage years. And I started harnessing it and letting it guide me into what my life is now.
There's so much, around, and I want to kind of walk through this little bit of the story that you shared. How old were you when you got into that sexual trafficking kind of scenario? How old were you at that point?
I was 18. I was
Now, was
18.
there a part of you at that time that you were maybe, was it a rebellious part of your life? Were you just drawn in? Was it like, how did you get drawn into that vortex? We had a guest, I think I shared briefly with you, Norma Bastidas, who was a guest on the show, that little different scenario, but same scenario. And she got drawn in through a modeling agency that took her out of one country into another country. She's on her own. They've got her passport. It's a really, and she's gone on to do some amazing things in that space. But what was it for you? How did you get drawn into that? Given that, to your point, you kind of parked that intuition to the side, or you let other, I guess, senses overtake or impact your decision. What do you think was going on for you at that time?
Well, I think it's so multifaceted and multi-layered. So many things got to align just right for me to be really susceptible to that. One of which is within sex trafficking, human trafficking, it is not being picked up off the street and having your mouth covered, and not always. Of course, there is that, but the majority of it comes with a psychological process.
Hmm.
And that's what's so insidious about it, because there's not much that can be done when you are 18 years old and you are susceptible to that psychological aspect. It looks as though you're like, sure, let me go do this,
Hmm.
right? So now the how it happened for me is I met somebody. He was a guy that I was very attracted to, started out as dating, and he's a professional. I was 18, he was 42.
Hmm.
Um, I did not know that at the time, right? So much you learn later, after, in hindsight. But he was over 20 years older than me. This is something he had done for decades. I was 18. My brain wasn't even fully developed in
Sure.
terms of long-term consequences. I also had a deep father wound. I was abandoned as a little girl and did not have a father figure. And so it was just this perfect, just this perfect storm of him being a father, age, me being very susceptible, truly willing to sacrifice myself in order to feel a love that I felt like I had missed my whole life.
Mm.
And so that made me very, very a very easy target to be like, well, whatever it takes. And it was very incremental, right? It wasn't overnight. But the moment you cross state lines, the moment, or, very, very similar to that other woman's story, you cross state lines or you're out of the country and you're of age, they consider that consent. They consider
Yes.
that consent, right? And so for me, that was really how it got started. It was an infatuation, and then you get far enough along and now it's a trap. There is not many ways out. Pretty soon you're not allowed to leave. Pretty soon you don't have resources to leave. Pretty soon you no longer have friends or family. My family was they tried everything. They even called police departments in Vegas, in California. And the answer was, she's 18. If she wants to go, she can go. Right.
Hmm. These are such sad stories, and especially with all that's coming up these days in the whole conversation around children to begin with. But that's something, what you experienced is some version of what's been going on for many, many years. This isn't a new thing. And, I can't imagine the kind of trauma it creates or causes. Now, when we think about that, I mean, just in what you described, there's some childhood trauma, then there's, young adult trauma, and yet you pick yourself up, you dust yourself off. I guess maybe at some level it's a case of survival, but you can either cave into being a victim to it, and it would be, I guess, rightly, yes, you were a victim to it. So you can either live into that victimness, or you heal wounds, you heal trauma, you pick yourself up, you dust yourself off, you figure out a way to move forward, which you've done, obviously. Now, when you are dealing with some of these issues, and I think it's important to maybe share with people is that, again, what happened. Yes, you were a young adult. Yes, you made those conscious decisions. Yes, you sidestepped the glaring whatever, intuition that you had, but ultimately it was a trap and you fell into the trap and you were dragged into it, and it ended up the way it is. Now, how do you, when you reflect, were you then supported well with your family? How did you deal with that trauma and not fall into, curling up in the fetal position on the couch of your parents' house going, what has happened to me? I can't move on. Like, what stopped you from going there for at least an extended period? Not that you didn't, maybe for a brief moment, but give us a little bit of that kind of background as well.
Yeah, because it has been such a conscious choice to see that time as a gift, and I did not immediately get there, right? This has been years of integration, years of shadow work, years of psychotherapy, and a deep excavation of really whatever aligned me with such an experience. And it takes a high level of awareness and radical honesty and choice in healing, because it could just be so much easier to, for a time, not long term, to have just been the victim and to have just had trauma and to just be, that is what it is, that happened to me. And it did happen, and I did that actually the first year and a half after I left, after I was finally able to escape in the middle of the night, that was a much harder time than even being in the industry. Was the first 1 to 2 years afterwards, the disillusion that happens, right? What do I do now? My goodness, I did curl up on my mom's couch for a year. And then once I finally got the guts to get out, I went and binged partied for another year, until eventually I almost, tried to take my own life. And that was the turning point. That was when I got to go to a treatment center and really was understanding, right? And so it was a very deep, dark night of the soul afterwards. I didn't come out going like, oh, how can I make this work for me now? I came out like, what is my worth? I am disgusted with myself. I can never go back into society. It was very insidious, because while I had very little of my own, I lived a very luxurious lifestyle. And so right there was just even some more dissonance of like, wait, now I have to go back to this. Even a job that I could get, I couldn't actually afford a car, yet here I was living in high rises and, driving Escalades and that kind of thing. So there's a lot of disillusion, and those initial years was focused heavily on healing and on integrating and on choosing an interpretation. And it has been so many years now, gosh, 14 years, that within the last 7 or so, on a deeper spiritual path, I can really see the beauty in it. I deeply love that person, me, who had been sex trafficked, and I deeply love the man who did it. Deeply love him. Yeah. And deeply forget. I don't even have anything to forgive, right? It's just that it was a blessing. I can see how it could not be a blessing for most people. That would take a long time to get there. But for me, eventually I could get to that place.
It's interesting that through all of this, when you're sharing that, I mean, there's a lot of things that, I would have questions around just because of your experience. But what you just said was something that people have a tough time dealing or getting to. And that is that you could actually forgive or not even feel the need to forgive the person or people who were involved in it. As a coach, and we did a lot of work with a guy by the name of Dr. John DeMartini, who does what he calls a quantum collapse, which is getting to that point. And I actually watched him work with a client, with her permission, by the way, in a particular setting. But ultimately, she had been raped by an uncle and a father. And she actually did the work where she actually collapsed that that point of in her life, those incidents with her uncle and her father, to the point where it was just flat. Like, she saw the benefits, the downside and the upside equalized, and it collapsed. It was like, okay, I see. And which is really what you got out of a lot of what I'm hearing you say, is that within it all, there was a lot of gifts, but you actually have to see that, and you have to kind of appreciate that, and collapse it from the negative side of that conversation. And I don't want to put words in your mouth. I'm actually describing what I learned from John DeMartini. And it was very, very interesting how it's impacted even my life in terms of how I collapse certain situations. But I want to go back, because if I'm understanding what you're saying, it's such a fascinating story, Megan, because what I'm hearing you say is that even while you were in that, were you still in contact with some family, some friends? Were they aware of what was going on and they couldn't draw you out of it? You were sucked into that vortex and there was no pulling you out from their side of the. Is that a fair statement? So you're living this lifestyle, people are viewing that, they're pissed off, they're going, what the hell is she doing? She can't see it, blah, blah, blah. You get out of it. So then that would mean, and what I'm hearing is very little empathy, very little compassion. They don't understand the psychological dynamics of it. And now you're kind of standing there on your own with the support of your mother, by the sounds of it, and a strong support system, probably at some levels struggling or suffering from PTSD or something. I'm guessing. I mean, there's that part of it. And then you have to start the process of healing that and getting through the trauma of that. And I love what you said, is that it wasn't like you picked yourself up and dusted yourself off. You know, that works great in the movies and that works great in some storybooks. But ultimately, if you don't heal those wounds, you're operating on top of those wounds, but then comes out sideways in some other way, whether that's violence or anger or drugs or whatever that might be. So a little bit long-winded, but is that describing a little bit of what you went through, Megan?
Yeah, absolutely. And this is where, while the story can sound inspiring, it is important to not spiritually bypass, right? Not go into, immediate forgiveness, that there really had to be a come to Jesus for me. I still had a lot of illusion. It was probably a good 2 months into finally escaping and like not being able to leave the house and being in a deep depression, that my mom asked me to watch with her a documentary on sex trafficking. And that was actually when it clicked for me. Did not click for me when I was still in it. He to me was my boyfriend. He to me was my partner. There was not this idea that he was a pimp. And then when I watched that, it was sickening. It was I was physically ill for weeks after that. I thought I had a stomach bug, and it had actually come from the disillusion, right? Whoa, I have not been, like, where have I been, right? Like, how could I have that much of me asleep to not be able to see this? Because now it's obvious. Oh my God, no, it's so obvious, right? I was just like, how did I not see this? And so there just was no spiritual bypassing. It was a deep excavation that was required. And I love the example that you gave of the neutralization, because eventually I could see him as innocent as me. He was not born that, right? He was not born that. He had to be deeply, deeply wounded to be able to perpetuate such a thing.
There's a quote, and it's hard to articulate, but it's no forgiveness, no peace. No spelled N-O, forgiveness, no peace, K-N-O, peace. No forgiveness, K-N-O-W, forgiveness, no peace. Like it's the play on the words of, in other words, to have peace, you have to forgive. Now, that I can't imagine how difficult that is to do, but in that, let's unpack a little bit, because I'm fascinated by this topic, and we don't have to carry on if you don't want, but I'm sure in all of that, Megan, there was a part of it where you had to forgive yourself. I know I've done some dumb things in my life, not to that extreme, where I've made some what I consider horrendous mistakes, like dumb. And then I look at it, and the most difficult time I've had is, forget about forgiving those that were kind of drew me that direction. I can actually I can get flat on that, but I really have troubles forgiving myself. And even to this day, as I'm saying that, there are things that I'm going, yeah, I've forgiven myself mostly, and maybe it's just because time has passed. But how about you in that whole process? Because you have to take responsibility for it. You're not being a victim to it, which means you got to own your role in it. How have you been with that?
Oh, it was and still is. Oftentimes I get to revisit that now in the healing journey for me, there was a point of forgiveness, and then there is acceptance and approval, right? Now, I would say I don't often struggle with forgiving myself now. I very much have forgiven that aspect, but every once in a while there will be a judgment,
Yeah.
right? So I should have done it different. And so that is kind of like the residual that's still there. It's still integrating full love, acceptance, and approval of myself. The situation, yeah, that's easy. Even him was easier than, oh, I love, accept, and approve of myself, especially earlier on when I was a single mom and those decisions were affecting the quality of life of my kids, right?
Yeah.
That was where I really got to go like, wow, you have no idea at 17, 18, 19 years old, the long-term effects of each individual decision. And so that's where I found most of the difficulty was accepting and loving and approving of me in that time, even though my current situation was now suffering from the past decision, right? So that for me is where it is a little more, if there is a difficulty, it is in that place of deeply loving me, even with that history.
It's for me, anyways, is what I've come to discover about myself is I don't hang out in the past. So it's not that I don't acknowledge that a past existed, but ultimately it's the story I have around the past, which is I'm, in my own view of the world, philosophically, I look at it and go, I'm looking at it through a different lens today than I saw it back when it was happening. So whatever story I have about my past is not really true anyways. It's just a story. And yes, it was real for me, but I don't hang on to the past. It's gone. I can't do anything about it. I learned from it, have to move on. I'm pretty good that way. So it's not like I operate on top of that in that regard. But I also look at it, as I'm listening to you explain, and where you get to what I think is to bring the gift that gave you forward, like having a conversation today, and I'm sure on many other podcasts where you get to share the story. To me, that is a gift. I see the conversation with you today as a gift in terms of what the listeners can maybe pick up on and relate to. And it's just not about the experience and where the path you went down to, but it's really starting to understand ourselves and whatever the trauma is. And I mean, there's lots of traumas that we have in life as people growing up. But if we can really take it and own it, and at least in hindsight, look at it and go, I am who I am today because of the experiences I had. And it was what really developed and gave me some of the skills that I have, gave me the wisdom, the insights that I have. And if we can look at it, I think from that perspective, that's helpful. My observation is that you've actually done that. You've taken your life experience and the gifts that life experience gave you, and you've now used it to share with others and use it as, of course, to provide a business solution and to tap into for others. And I think that in itself is, a profound thought process.
Yeah, and it's a great marker of healing as well, right?
Mhm.
Because for a long while it was such a deep, pretty dark closet secret.
Mhm.
And really what I was starting to learn was, wow, our wounds can be our wisdom. Really, our trauma can be our treasure, right? That it is here to serve us in all ways. My interpretation of it is up to me now. So do I interpret that as life experience or do I interpret that as a handicap? And for me, it is quality life experience.
Mhm.
Quality life experience. Yeah.
Yeah, well, all these phrases, what doesn't kill you makes you stronger. You start to realize that when we go through what seemingly are burdens and experiences that are almost crushing, you came out of it stronger because of it. And ultimately, I think that's at least, if nothing else, we gain that kind of perspective from somebody like yourself to know that, yeah, these things that people go through, and we see it and we observe it, and sometimes we may judge it as a negative thing, and we judge them for what they did or didn't do, whatever the story is. But if they pick themselves up and really look at it, they don't come out as victims, and we can actually learn from their experience. I think it's really powerful.
Mhm.
You know, Megan, when you start to consider now, this many years later, I believe in your bio, it read you're in another, or not another, but a new relationship, or a husband and more children. In all of that process, how did that impact relationships? For example, are you now, you've got a thriving business, you've had a number of thriving businesses, you continue to support and consult with other business people. So you've kind of recovered, you've got this whole life going on. How did that whole experience impact relationships for you?
Ooh, well, it was such an opportunity, really such an opportunity for growth. My first marriage had remnants of my relationship from sex trafficking, but it also had a very wide spectrum, almost the complete opposite, right?
Mm.
So I married someone that was extremely traditional. And wanted me to stay home and be a mom. So I went from, really being used and exploited and having to pay money and that sort of thing, into being a kept woman.
Yeah,
um, and it was a nice he was fabulous for that level of
yeah,
consciousness that I was in, right? We had a very nice relationship, but it was not deeply meaningful. It
sure.
was like a stop. It was like a rest stop,
A
right?
place to heal, a
So,
place to heal, a place to kind of come together, to your point, to rest and
yeah,
recover.
exactly. But we had some interesting dynamics there, right? Was very unconscious, had a lot of unconscious commitments still there. And so after that marriage, and he is the father of my two older kids. After that, I spent many years doing deep, deep diving healing. I felt like I had really moved past the sex trafficking, and I was well into creating businesses and discovering myself and spiritually evolving. And that's where I really got to start playing with the dynamic of relationships and how I show up and who I attract and that sort of thing. So if anything, it has been an opportunity to be fully expressed.
Mhm.
How often I would go, "Ugh, I need to hide this," like, or gosh, what a drag that I have to tell this story again to a new man. What is he going to think of me? And it really wasn't until I was proud of that experience and who I had become over the years due to that experience. My husband now, who is fabulous, he's was is now retired, not retired, thanks to our thriving businesses and all of that. But he was in law enforcement, and so he really kind of knew some of the back ends of those things, and was very open-hearted, very loving. And so we still get to play with some of those dynamics. We work with a relationship mentor for 3 years now, every single week, in order to keep our relationship in a really healthy, loving, connected, open space. And I don't know that I would do relationships without that sort of support, because I still have unconscious tendencies, right, of overproduction or self-sacrifice. And so we really get to call each other forward in that. So if anything, it's made me more conscious.
Yeah, well, that's so interesting, because I mean, just your history and what you've shared. I mean, you're obviously a free spirit. You're very creative, and having and wanting to harness that to actually manage it, because as you're still experiencing to this day, it can get away on you, and certainly that's something that you would want to and need to keep in check. when you start to, kind of consider it all, Megan, is that you reflect on it, you see how big a benefit it's been in your life, the lessons you've learned, the wisdom that you've gained, what you can apply. Does it, I'm sure it does, but, has it, do you think, impacted how you relate to your children, how you, I guess, guide your children, how you are as a parent? Do you think you're kind of living in a different box? Are you overprotective, or are you more communicative, or how is it that you are relating to your children maybe differently given that experience than perhaps you would have without?
Yeah, because I really do have that idea that I think maybe some people could watch the news and go, God, I would never want that to happen to my kids. That couldn't happen to them, right? Like, I'm going to do these things to make sure. And I've had a real life experience of how easy it can be. And so my approach is different. My approach with my daughters is that they are fully expressed at all times. They are not meant to play nice. They're not here to be nice. They're not here to please. Instead, they're here to be themselves. And sometimes they can be kind, but they're not here to be nice, right? They can be kind and they can be considerate, but they're here to be as expressed as they would like to be. My son, we have lots of consent conversations, and like, what does that look beyond a word? Like, can we feel and read a room? Can we feel and read a person, right? Like, what does this body language mean versus that? And same with the girls. I mean, this is just a conversation with all of them, is full expression. Secrets make you sick, right? So everything is welcome here. There is no secret you have to hide from us, right? You are always, always safe to come home. There is nothing you could do so wrong that would keep you away from our home or our family. That was my saving grace. It was after 4 years, I could still call mom up, and she drove across states in the middle of the night and brought me home. And so the fact that that is one of our messages, is you're always allowed to come home. It's always safe for you. And people communicate beyond words. People communicate with their body. They communicate with their energy. So can we be in tune with people and ourselves to read them and to trust what's coming up? That if you don't like someone, that's good enough for me.
Mm-hmm.
You don't feel safe around someone, that's good enough for me. You don't ever have to touch them again. You'll have to be or be in the same room as them, right? We don't hug family because they're family. There's just a real sense of autonomy that is taught within our household.
So when you think about children in general, and your own children that you've brought up and we're talking about right now, but when you're kind of engaging, and I know my own daughter, who, I've got grandkids 7 and 6 years old, and she's very much built like you in terms of her own wanting and willing and journey of tapping into consciousness, tapping into, as you described, the quantum field and her intuition. And she's encouraging her kids to be the same way. She's asking them, what's your sense of that? How do you feel about that? So she's kind of, in her world, is trying to teach her children to tap into that part of their, I guess, awareness, if you will. I'll use that word for now. How is it, is that something that you look forward to kind of trying to draw out? I'm sure you've actually have started to, and are you seeing the results of that in some way, that where the kids are going, Mom, I just don't have a good feeling about them or this situation? How is that showing up for you?
Yeah, it shows up that they're just more communicative, right? They're available to say, I feel this in my body, right? I feel this in my body. And when I'm with those friends or with these people, or I don't feel safe, right? Those sorts of things are easy for them to say because we have open communication. And I notice that their dad is Catholic. So they have a wide spectrum of what a spiritual practice and also even just basic manners look like, right? And so my goal is really to keep them as clean slate as possible. Instead of teaching them my right and wrong or their dad's right and wrong, it is their own, what are they naturally drawn to? Again, tapping into their body, tapping into their own knowing, what feels true for you. There's so many truths, right? So really just having them be fully expressed in all areas is what I'm noticing. And what I notice is other people don't do it like this. That's where I see a little bit different for them is other people don't know what I mean when I say energy. Other people call that God. They say God is a man, right? So I noticed that a lot of what we practice, they go, this doesn't quite fit in. Do I have to do that? Do I believe that? And my answer to them is no. They get to do what feels good for them.
Mm-hmm. Interesting. I love the conversation because it is, ultimately, as parents, when you can create the space and hold the space for your kids to show up and trust and know that they're loved and they're not being judged, I think it just improves communication. For 2024, my wife, Stephanie, and I, our theme is clarity equals velocity. And of course, that comes from powerful communication. And we just dropped the podcast today, as a matter of fact. It came out at the time of this, and it's about perception versus perspective and understanding that the misalignment of perception collides with perspective. And if we can slow down long enough to grasp and understand that somebody's got a perception that creates their perspective, and that's where the misalignments occur. And if we can just get clear on that conversation, how it opens up a way different level of communication. And to your point around your kids is that they have the perception that they have a perspective gained by how you and your husband live your life, how you support the kids and the conversations that you're having. And I just think it's a really powerful way to kind of exist and to be in conversations and to gain clarity and to have the confidence that home is safe and that you can always come home is such an important conversation, I believe. And so it's just, I guess, fascinating again to the gifts that you gained through that really tough experience that you went through and how you're able to apply them today. So, kudos to you in all of that. So I love it. And now you've done on more than one occasion, you've created businesses around it. You've supported others in building their businesses around it. And when you reflect and then say, okay, well, what does the future look like for me? Is it more of the same? What is it for you as you look into the future and the vision that you might have? Is there some, let's just talk about it from a business point of view or whatever it is for you. What is next for Megan?
Yeah. From a business perspective, as we are continually growing Megan Camille Enterprises, gets to be an empire at some point. I believe that everyone should have the access to know how to generate their own money, be free from a 40-hour work week, and do what it is that they love without sacrificing their time with their family, with their own spiritual or practice, with their own personal development, that those are actually as equally important as our work in the world and the money that we make, and that they shouldn't be at polar opposites. Instead, they could come together and work really well. And, that's really the message that Megan Camille Enterprises carries. And so our goal is to put that out into the world and just let it go as big as the world is ready for. And personally, it is always keeping family at the forefront. I used to really think that having so many kids, or even just when I was a single mom, prohibited me from reaching higher heights. And I learned a long time ago that making them my burden burdening them with my, fear of not being enough just wasn't working. And so instead, they've always been the inspiration. Since that turning point was like, oh wait, what if actually this is part of the magic? And that having a big family has taught me how to generate a lot of money in a short amount of time. And so anyone with a family, anyone with kids, anyone, even if you don't have kids, it's really such a blessing to be able to trust your intuition, to be able to generate money, and also honor your time and your joy and your family and your freedom.
Love it. Love it. Megan, as we wind down, you've been very generous with your time. Appreciate it. I come to a segment of the show which is meant to be a little bit lighter, a little bit fun, or not that I've been enjoying myself immensely, by the way. I love this conversation. Um, just some fun, what I call rapid fire questions that are rarely rapid fire, but listen, it's a fun segment of the show. And so you ready to go?
I'm ready.
Okay, here we go. I'll throw you an easy one. Android or Apple?
Apple.
Okay, right across the board, computers, you're an Apple whole system.
Well, I prefer Apple, but I have an iPhone. But actually, my laptop is Windows, and I am not a techie person. So I just go with what I'm familiar with.
Oh, you're cheating on your iPhone. Okay, I get it. I get it.
Yeah. I play for both teams, I guess.
Do you have a favorite tune, favorite band?
Yes, Red Hot Chili Peppers and the Cranberries. Really.
Oh, there you go. Wow, that was pretty quick. Favorite movie? Do you have one?
Inception.
Oh, that's more recent. That's what, in the past 3 or 4 years or something, right?
No, I think that was probably 10 or 12. It had Leonardo DiCaprio.
Obviously, a different movie than I'm thinking of, but I know I'm familiar with that movie. I'm just probably in the wrong time frame in all of it. So that's interesting. Your room, your desk, or your car, what do you clean or have cleaned first?
My room. I am blessed to have housekeepers because I have to have a very tidy space for my mind to just work well and to flow. And unfortunately, I'm not wildly organized myself. So the only thing I keep clean is my desk. Everything else is thankfully done for me now.
Beautiful. Now, this is a little bit off what I normally go, but you showed up for me. Do you have a practice of, in your own day-to-day healthcare, self-care? Are you training, working out, meditating, journaling? Or is there some things that you do, and you do them in the morning, in the evening? How do you kind of structure your day that way?
Every single day is non-negotiable self-care before any of the kids are awake. Again, I have a husband who is a very active primary parent in our house. And so he gets the babies. We have toddler twins. So he gets them first thing, and I do my self-care for the morning. And there is meditation, breath work, cold plunging on a couple of weeks per month, and lots of inner play, parts work, and meditation, all of that every single day, non-negotiable.
Beautiful. I love that. Yeah. I'm not surprised by that, by the way. So that's awesome. So if there is a God, what do you want to hear him or her say when you get to the gates?
Oh, that one gives me chills. And I feel like I've probably already heard it, which is, you're enough and there's nothing else to do.
Yeah. Beautiful. Beautiful. And Megan, finally, what are you grateful for?
Oh, so much. That one can't be rapid fire. That could take like a millennia. I'm grateful for my mom, who has always let me come home. I'm grateful for my husband, who is up for a wild, wild ride. I'm grateful for my kids and my clients, and I'm grateful for myself.
Beautiful. And I am at bare minimum grateful to have had the opportunity to have this conversation with you and share it with the Everyday Millionaire listeners. Like you, I am grateful for an amazing life, an amazing wife. And thank you so much for sharing your time. I am eternally grateful for the story and what you brought to the show today. So thanks very much.
Thank you. Thank you so much for having me.